All right, we will get started with the show this week on Left to the Projector, and we are talking about the 2004 movie Saved. If you aren't aware, it starred Mandy Moore, Macaulay Culkin, and Jenny Malone. And here to talk about it with me, I have Smirk Gently and James. Thank you both for joining with me today.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Good to be back.
Yeah, yes. You're like I think the term is like friend of the show. I think when I hear like other podcasts, they're like, "Oh, you're the friend of the show." So I'll
You have
go
to
with
get
that.
me a gotta get me a different shirt with friend of the show on the back.
Yes, like or like a mug, so you can like hold it up while you're
Yeah, yeah, perfect.
doing. I guess it's a podcast. No one will be able to see you,
That's okay.
but that's okay. But I don't know. I hadn't seen this movie in like decades. It's been 20 years since it came out. I know you mentioned it, Smirk, that you had seen this movie before. I don't know how many times, but you had some pretty good memories of it. What did you think of this movie, James, generally?
Honestly, I thought the movie was really funny. And like, I guess was looking into it, I know it had a really big Christian past. And it really did show like the like relationships and like how social settings within Christian circles and conservative circles like really works. It was really interesting. It kind of gave me a little bit of PTSD, I'm not gonna lie.
Oh my god.
Ye-
Yes, like the way they portray like the Christian mean girl sort of aesthetic. And also I think it's really great the school is called American Eagle because that sort of like I mean that's very 2004 anyway, but all the awful people that I had to associate with on like a weekly and sometimes daily basis in that environment, yeah, that just oh man, that
Oh
that
yeah.
dynamic is rough. That's really rough. And they did it well. There must have been people in that writing room who knew exactly what it was like. A few people who went to Christian school or at least had parents that were like church 3, 4 times a week.
Oh yeah, definitely,
Well, the
definitely.
the the director, Brian Danley, he I was reading that he was a was from this kind of community, like went to a Christian school, was like a closeted at the time, like couldn't come out because of it. And he leaned on
Mhm.
some of that experience, but apparently he did also add other like not everything that in this movie happened to him. But like you said, probably whoever wrote this with him was like, this is another experience. And being myself, having gone to like the opposite, I'm Jewish and went to a Jewish school. So it's like a complete opposite thing of this, but I could see there being this like expectation to act a certain way. And if you don't act that way, like you're immediately like a sinner. Like that's they constantly say. And like the whole idea of the movie is like Hillary, and I just said Hillary Duff when I meant to say Mandy Moore. Mandy Moore's character in this is goal is to save people, to make them back to Jesus. I don't know. Is that like a thing that people like in these communities were constantly doing?
It's like a call to assimilation, essentially. You know, like if you are, different whatsoever, if you're othered whatsoever, and it's kind of like, let's try to fix that the best in which we can. However, you can only go so far realistically. So, yeah, it's really interesting in those spaces whenever you're like maybe queer or you're black or maybe, for example, in Roland's situation, disabled. Like it's really interesting to see how they treat people who are different. Yeah.
Which is ironic, especially in the case of Roland's character, who's Macaulay Culkin, played by Macaulay Culkin, being disabled. Like they treat others all like very poorly, but it's like the opposite of like the whole like we're Christian and like everyone like is one and the same with Jesus or I don't know like the way that they like portray themselves is clearly out in the open in this movie, maybe in
Well,
like obviously a satirical way.
that's all part of it too. I mean, the performance of holiness and godliness is very much social currency in these circles. Like when you're at church or at a prayer meeting or at like going to a Christian school, performing that sort of godliness and being the person to pray out loud or the one worship team is basically like like in a teen movie, like what the cheerleaders would be, is essentially what the worship team girls are supposed to be, like the upper echelon of the top tier of like the Christian gals. So all of
Exactly.
it's all that very performative, like out in public, let everybody see me looking very godly, because that's social currency. You can then wield that to have some sort of power over other people, which we see as like the movie goes on and Mary falls out of favor.
Yeah, yeah. And just to emphasize that, like how the the jewels for Jesus, I think that was they were called. Oh my gosh, they were like basically rock stars. Yeah. I mean that plays out because that plays out very much so in, mega churches today. So easily. The worship team, all rock stars, all elevated on this like insane level. Yeah, and I'm not going to say that, all of them are, exactly as vain as Hillary Faye. I'm not going to say that. But there's varying degrees, I will admit. So,
Yeah, Hillary Faye, sort of like the, the mean girl, if you will, played by Mandy Moore, not played by Hillary Duff.
yeah.
But like the sort of the like the sketch of this movie at the beginning really is you have Mary, ironically named. I mean, I guess you have to have your main character named Mary in this. Perfect, played by Jena Malone, and she has a boyfriend who I think his name Patrick, and Patrick believes that he is gay, but he doesn't want to, or he has feelings he believes he shouldn't feel, I guess is kind of this thing. And
Well, Dean is her boyfriend that's gay. Patrick is the
sorry,
pastor's boyfriend.
Later, yeah.
yes. Uh, yeah, scratch all of that. Dean is the person I was referring to. And so you kind of have this immediate sense of like the repression of anything that's different, especially being gay, especially, Macaulay Culkin's character can't hide being disabled in a wheelchair, but
Mm.
it's very much, and yeah, I guess I'm just, I guess I'm not flabbergasted by the way they treat or the way you're treated, but it's amazing to see it portrayed this way in like a comedic light, because it's not funny, but like they made it funny.
They did make it funny. But yeah, no, I mean, yeah. Also, like, I want to point out like the really funny, but also like kind of crappy like puns that they made about like Roland. Like I'm like, come on. Like the name. I'm like, come on, the
Yeah.
name Roland. I'm like, you guys, like, come on. And then like the little joke about Dean at the beginning of the movie when he went off to Mercy House. They were like, is he gonna come out?
Yeah.
That was
Yes.
great.
Yeah.
It
Very
really was.
very on the nose little. And I
Yeah.
thought generally speaking, like the dialogue, I made a note of this sort of at the beginning. There were a bunch of like little conversations between, I think it's like the friend group of like the mean girls around Hillary Faye. I think it's Tia, and then there's Veronica, who
Mhm.
they casually mentioned was adopted from Vietnam, from like a place of godlessness, which I thought was like true. Like there was a lot of anti-communist little like sly little language in this, like very like anti-China comments, anti-Vietnam, like, oh, those godless people that we had to save, because they were doing missionary work. I don't know. I saw your face, James. Like that shit
No,
was
yeah.
that shit.
No, yeah. I was just thinking about oh my gosh. I was locked in for way too long. So like I lived with some of that into my adult life, but like geez, anti-communism, like anti like leftist thought, like just baked into like religious spaces. It's so insane. Yeah, no, you can't say anything like positive about China or Vietnam or honestly anything that's like left of center whatsoever. And yeah, it's just hilarious to see that, outside of that space, you're like, oh, they're like, oh man, like, like poor godless people of Vietnam, whatever. Yeah, it's really interesting to see. Yeah.
And there was the line too saying like, oh, if you were from China, like they would have like killed you. because of like their like the one child policy. It's like
Yeah. And she's like,
Right.
Roland, then where would you be? And he goes, well, in China.
Right.
probably better off
Yeah.
than this community.
Yeah, it's funny because like that's very much a thing in like in evangelical and fundamentalist Christian circles. Adoption is basically like it's like missionary work in reverse. Basically, it's like they're saving these kids from these godless homes and everything. And they're doing like the whole like white savior thing. Like there's bringing these kids from other countries so they can mold them into an example of what God can do for you if you just abandon your culture and everything else and just buy into, you know, what the nice white Christian people have to offer.
Right. Yes, huge into abandoning culture, huge into like, oh man, like look what, God can do. Like we like oh my God. And I feel that especially like, being black in those spaces, seeing other like black people who are like adopted into like white evangelical families. And it's just it's incredibly annoying to see. Just I don't know how they treat other black people who are not like also assimilated. You know what I mean? It's truly hilarious and interesting and annoying.
And that was the only person of color in this entire movie was
who has the speaking
Veronica.
part. Yeah.
Veronica,
Yeah, the only one. I was like, it's actually not God that's the thing that's giving you all these things. It's actually just capitalism that's bringing you these, useless things you don't need.
In the
Right.
beginning when Hillary Faye, right? I took down that post I put on TikTok about this because I realized as you said that I was like I wrote Hillary Duff in the caption, and I don't
Is
know
that
what
what
it is
I
that
thought?
weird
That's
weird
what got in
association.
my
And
head.
I was like, God damn it! But anyway, in the beginning, I think like the opening scene, Hillary Faye is like painting the billboard, the giant like Jesus thing, and Roland is sitting there like watching her, and he's like, I'm pretty sure he's not supposed to be white, and she's like, of course he's white. And then
Yes.
yeah, and then throughout this, and it's just sorry, hold on.
Yeah, I caught that line too. It's like, actually, I think he's like, I read somewhere that he wasn't actually white. It's like he was from the Middle East. I don't think there was any
Like white guys.
white dudes chilling around there, Yeah, that's one of those things
Right.
too. But the whole setup very much shows it. I feel like every character seemed like very stereotypically fitting a role. Then you had like the pastor, who I feel like was the most cringe character in this entire movie. Like his little like attempts to like be cool and say like jivey. He uses the word like fat. Like
Does he? I didn't even
yes,
realize that. Okay.
there was one point, and the only reason I noticed it was because I had the captions on, and it's like PHAT. I'm like, did he just say that unironically? And it's terrible. But his character I found was very. I don't know. Is that like the personification of these pastors at just schools or like the church community? Like these
Yeah.
trying to connect with the people, or is that just because?
Yeah. No,
It's funny?
no, definitely. They within the church community, within Christian spaces, they try very, very, very hard to seem relatable to like the general public, even though they are not. And even though like, what they're saying is not palatable whatsoever. Everyone like despises what they're saying, and they like try so hard to like be cool. Like for example, like I don't know, Christian rap, they like generated an entire industry to be cool and like, oh yeah, like it's totally cool to be Christian and stuff like that. And we have black guys, oh my gosh, we have black guys rapping, and that's so cool. And like the main demographic is like just like, I don't know, like it's from the Midwest or something like that. Yeah, no, they try so hard, and no, people still don't like them.
I was talking about the pastor and how like did you catch where he said he referred to like something as being fat?
Yeah, and then like when he was talking to Hillary Faye, he was like, "Oh, she's Mary's part of your posse," and like,
Yeah,
I
it's like
feel like
Posse.
in the beginning he said, I don't know, when he was on the stage and he was using like a bunch of like hip lingo or whatever, and it just it's cringy, but that's very much like what the youth pastor types would do. 100%. Yeah,
He went on like a
exactly what you
Tumblr
said. To
page to look
seem,
for cool words and was like, I'm
yeah,
going to use these words.
exactly as you were saying, James. Like to be relatable, to seem more like, I don't know, interesting. And then later on when he's talking about like how to reach kids, I can't tell the difference between like Christian rock and regular rock anymore, and that's the point. Like you've saved another soul or whatever. Like that's part of it. That's why they co-opt all of this other like what would be considered like counterculture and mold it and like pervert it into their own message. It's to kind of like trick people into that and to be sort of grabby to like younger kids who are looking for something that's a little bit outside of the realm of what their parents are going to accept, but they're still going to be able to like go to a concert or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Flyleaf would be like a good example.
Flyleaf, Reliant K, Skillet.
I
Oh
saw them
my
like 3
gosh.
times. I saw Skillet like three different times.
Oh no way. Was it good? Did you like it?
It was fine.
I wanted to go to one of those concerts so bad as a kid. Also, kind of as an adult. Like, you know what? Like, that was my childhood, like, why not?
I mean, it's not a bad time. It's just, like half the time it's in a church basement. But I
Right.
mean, at least
And
you're getting out of the house. It's like
right.
it's not Bible study.
Right.
The one of the so the I was just talking about the principal, like kind of the characters. We talked about most of them, I think. Well, I think like the whole entire like kind of plot sets off when Mary is like given the advice to, not exactly an explicit term, but basically like you need to have sex with your boyfriend so that you can convince him that he's not gay, or like you can, I don't know, like like have, I don't know, like fuck the gay away. I don't know, like is that some, I don't know. I don't know. That's a very crude way to say it, but I feel like that's kind of like what they're saying. And I think one of them says, "How can he be gay? He's Christian," which I thought was like a ridiculous, like,
Right.
just very repressed. And I think it's also funny later when we see like the sex ed class that they have in school. And it's like, no wonder they don't know anything. Like the man with like no genitals, it's just like a body. But like, it's
Right.
just, it just, the plot seems so not far-fetched to me. Like that, like
It
laying out
isn't.
of it.
It isn't. No. I mean, especially with them in like, their perception of gay people. You know what I mean? I mean, geez, I guess it's because like, Christians, like their worldview isn't really like based in like science or fact whatsoever. It's just completely void of that. So like they do not acknowledge the fact that, I don't know, gayness is just, or queerness in general is just something you're like born with, or like even like people that I still talk to, they will, because once again I left the church like 2 years ago, and they'll still be like, they'll say stuff like, oh yeah, like gayness is just like something that they have to work on, and I'm like, no, that's not something that someone has to work on. That's just who they are. Or people actually will legitimately will be like, that's just because gay people are gay because they were abused, and that's something we need to pray to them about. I'm like, no, sometimes people just like, guys just like men, and there's nothing really deep about that. It's just they see a guy and they like guys. I mean, it's not that deep.
Yeah.
But yeah, they'll say anything, everything actually, instead of that.
Yeah, if they frame it as deviant behavior, like if anything is a result of sin, then anything can be fixed through the faith. And that allows
Exactly.
them as parents and as community members to kind of abdicate their responsibility to foster healthy emotional and mental growth, especially with kids, because they're kind of left to flounder. And then, if they show any type of deviance, in terms of like not
Right.
being like straight and cis, then they're bundled away to some weird, I don't know, is it like they frame it like it's like it's almost like a rehab sort of place, and
Right.
then it's kind of has, I don't know if it's supposed to be like
For anyone, because she says like
conversion
some
therapy.
people go there for drugs,
Yeah,
drinking. It's like if you don't, if
Right.
Jesus is mad at you, like you got to go there.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But
Which
they do room the 2 gig hits together, which I think is brilliant planning on their part. Love that for them.
right.
But they had a
I mean, if they
Bible in the
pray
room. That could
together,
happen. Yeah, right.
Yep.
Exactly.
then everything will work out.
Well,
Uh,
this is like more like this might be deeper than this movie is perhaps. But the last episode we did was Ex Machina, or whatever the hell you
Mhm.
say it. And in the movie, there's like this idea that the AI is like programmed to be heterosexual, like because it's AI, so you can have it be whatever you want. And then it comes up to the debate we like briefly touched on it about like biological essentialism, or just the fact that you're programmed from birth to be like a certain gender or a certain sexuality. And I feel like
Mm.
Christians could use some of these arguments, but instead simply, which are also bullshit, but instead they just go straight to like it's evil because the Bible says so.
right.
Perhaps they don't even like attempt to use. They could use like decent reasoning, which still would be flawed, but they're like, nah.
The thing is, you can't do that because, I mean, you can't go anywhere outside of the Bible says so. And the Bible says that it's an abomination or whatever. Because if you do, then that leaves room for people picking apart the argument. And then that would
True.
require you to be intellectually honest. So realistically, you can't, you can't do anything but stick with that's what the Bible said, that's my religion, that's my interpretation. And if anyone else has a different interpretation, then it's that's not, you're not a real Christian. That's a false interpretation.
Yeah,
You know?
it's like a built-in fail-safe, like a get out of jail free card for like any sort of intellectual honesty, as you were saying. Like
Exactly.
you just no, actually, or the ultimate one, the Holy Spirit told me that that's not true. So
Oh my god.
you know,
I just want to know how, like, so often during the movie, like Hilary Faye and like so many different people would be like, "Oh yeah, like God told me this," and God told me
He's
to do this. God told me to sleep with Dean, and like it's always like just like aligned with their own interests.
Mhm.
Always, coincidentally.
God told me to spray paint terrible things on the outside of this building to frame
like
you.
but like the goofiest,
Right.
like most tame, like I don't even remember what most of it said. It was like only assholes pray. It was probably the most like egregious one, and then 666, and then like Pastor Skip sucks or something like that. Like the goofiest stuff, like the kind of thing only a Christian kid would come up with to like graffiti on the outside of school that they think like
Yeah, you'd think that Cassandra, who's like the troublemaker who ends up dating Roland, who's
Roland.
Jewish and like gets sent to the school because she's like kicked out of other schools. If she was like so evil and terrible, you think she would have thought some better things to spray paint on the building?
not a single dick,
Right.
Like God
not a one,
sucks.
not a one dick on the entire
Not one.
school.
Oh my god. Yeah. I was about to say, yeah, wow. Yeah. And I feel like if it was Cassandra, she would have done something much more devious. Her character, yeah, 100%.
Yeah, she's
Yeah,
way more clever and funny than that. Way more creative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
they like make her sort of like the outcast, but which I think is interesting too, is that regardless of the fact that she is Jewish, they still make a show of being like, oh, she can still be saved. Like anyone can be saved as long as what is
Say
it?
the words.
Yeah.
Say the magic words.
Yeah.
You just say a few words and like, yeah, Jesus loves you. Like he's just gonna forget the fact that, you were Jewish 20 minutes earlier.
She makes a point of that too. Hilary Faye, when she's like yelling at her in the hallway about something, she's like Edelstein, like she says it with like such like venom, like Sounds
catch
like
that.
you wouldn't think. I don't know. It's just the way she said it. It's not a slur, but it sounds like a slur. Like
Oh,
she's just like
A light slur.
really, yeah. I'm like,
right.
wow, like that was anti-Semitic for sure.
Oh snap! I didn't catch that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it is also perfect too that Hillary Faye's character also, they don't like allude to her being like extremely wealthy, but clearly like the most well off of all of the people, has like this nice van, has a credit card. They show her house briefly, and it's like pretty swank.
It
And
is.
of course, like she's the most godly because she has the most money.
Yeah. Oh my god. Oh my gosh. Yeah. No, especially in oh my gosh, in religious spaces, which coincidentally, of course, are conservative spaces. It's absolute like worship of the wealthy constantly, constantly. Oh my gosh. And yeah, no, I mean, I guess a bit. I mean, geez, just a bit of transparency. My parents are doctors, and within the church as well. So like, people would be like praising us because you're in a black church, everyone's mostly poor, right? And so they'll be like, "Oh my gosh, you guys are so holy. You guys are so." I'm like, "Yo, I do the same shit you guys do, right?" like I do the same shit you guys do, and like the holiest family in the entire church, they're like super dirt poor. Like, what are you guys like? That was probably like one of my biggest like radicalizing moments. You know, just growing up because I was just like, everyone says that, the wealthy are, God blesses you or whatever. But like that's just not the case, or that is the case, but like, when people aren't wealthy because they're good, because they're close with God. It's strictly because um of circumstance. It's strictly because of life. And that's something that they caught on with during the movie, for sure. Um, yeah, I feel
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. I think in especially in like mega churches and stuff like I don't know what kind of churches you went to, but we went to a couple like the huge ones when I was very young, and they would have like multiple offerings. It was like the regular offering, and the health and wealth offering, and the dollar offering, and they would do it like three different times throughout this hour and a half service. They would pass around the baskets or the buckets or whatever, and it's a way of like kind of twisting the existing scriptures that say like, oh, like the first will be last and whatever. It's like as if your wealth is somehow a signifier of your devotion to God. Like, well, if you're wealthy, if you're doing well, it must mean that God is blessing you, because otherwise he wouldn't allow you to have this money, but
Exactly.
in the same turn, they can say, well, I mean, you're supposed to be poor because God has given you this specific struggle in order to build you up so that like you're worthy of his kingdom later on. Like no matter what the case is as it relates to money and thereby capitalism, it's God's will.
Right.
So like just don't worry
Right.
about
And I think I was reading somewhere, but people were talking about how, it's especially like, like being like, oh man, don't worry about being poor now because you're going to be rich in heaven. Right. That entire sentiment is just based around like, okay, cool. Let's like give the poor people something so that like they do not like care whatsoever about their material conditions. They don't care about it. They don't worry about it. They may starve to death, but who cares? They're going to heaven one day and everything is going to be amazing. Even though we don't even have any, like, we can't even prove that. Who cares? We can't prove that. But like, you're going to go to heaven one day. Everything's going to be cool. And that will prevent people from revolting or questioning the king or the worship leaders or anything. Like, yeah, it definitely set up, to ensure that, empires are built in a very specific way.
it. Yeah,
Religions.
absolutely.
Yeah, the like the structure or the hierarchy of the school was like very clear. They didn't really show anyone that I would say would be deemed as like poor in the movie. Everyone was, like working class and up seemingly. I mean, they never really show Cassandra's family. They just show her like her car. So I guess perhaps she could be, but this is presumably an expensive school, right?
Yeah, I think that
Right. I
maybe.
will note though.
Go
Oh,
ahead.
go ahead. I will note though, Tia, okay, because she was
Oh,
othered,
I
and
know what
she
you're gonna
also
say.
worked a job.
2 jobs.
2 jobs. Look at that. And she was othered
Yeah.
very much, and people would talk about, like, I remember Hillary Faye one had said something like, "Oh, yeah, you smell like Tia's dad," or whatever. Like, I guess kind of alluding to, um, like, how she's possibly poor and that
Yeah.
her dad might be, like, a smoker or, a drinker or something like that. They're like, "Yeah, no. Like, we're othering Tia even though she very much so like
You're right.
fits like all the other like standards. We're othering her because she's like not rich. It was
Yeah, you're right.
Wow.
I completely forgot about this. She was working at the mall or something too, I think, and like, "Oh, you work here too?" Like
Right.
she like at the like yeah, the cafeteria, the eatery at the mall or something. Yeah.
Yeah,
You're
she
right. So
works
they
at
do
the
show hers.
cafeteria and then the pharmacy when she steals the pregnancy test.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Oh
Yes.
man.
So that's like so I mean we talked about the characters and everything, but like the undertone too, which also makes this movie absurd, is that Mary just starts getting like morning sickness and is worried that she's pregnant, steals a pregnancy test, determines she's pregnant. This is the beginning of the school year. And somehow, except for like when Cassandra sort of like uncovers that she's pregnant, she somehow is able to hide this from every single person, including her own mother, who later just like, I thought she was just getting fat, basically, is what she said. Like she hid pregnancy until like 8 months plus.
Yeah.
Are they like, I know it's a
That's got
movie, but come on.
that's got to be the most unrealistic part about this entire movie. The fact that
Yes.
she hid that for 8 months. I mean, let's be real honest. In a Christian school, come on, that's like the most like I'm not gonna say clicky, but the most like gossip driven place like ever, right? Like the typical like between like Christian schools and public schools, I would say like when we go ahead and talk about like the mean girl dynamic and the super gossipy dynamic and stuff like that you typically see in like schools, that's 100% Christian school right there. Like that's all Christian school. I would say like everything that they're like I wouldn't say that what they're showing here in the movie is like a huge dramatization. It's not a huge it's not like hugely
Yeah.
out of I guess question.
Yeah, it's pretty
Yeah.
accurate to the dynamics there, the social the social back
Hierarchies,
and
yeah.
forth. Yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah.
very much accurate.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
that yeah. And
because
yeah,
there's
like
nothing else to do. What else are they going to do?
right. Yeah,
Church.
I mean, everyone's church praying and then looking at everyone's bellies to see if someone's pregnant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, not to mention she bought all that stuff on Hillary's Faye's credit card, and somehow like the parent like didn't check that for like 6 months. It's not like a once every like 8 month credit card bill. Like those things comes every month, you know, right?
Right.
Like she didn't see that before. Like mom's
They
like,
must
why
be
did
pretty
she
well off. Yeah. Like
like when
that
they're
she
not
must,
checking their credit card bill? They're just like
yeah.
signing the check.
Whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-mm-mm.
That's true. Yeah, but I guess yeah. So I recount my statement that there is a pretty clear like hierarchy within the school of not just like the mean girls and the other outcasts, but the wealthy and the not wealthy. And the other thing
Mhm.
that I'm curious about, does anyone curious what Mary Louise Parker's character Lillian, like her job was? They had a pretty sweet house too, and I presume divorced, but I don't know because divorce is like kind of
You mean the mom?
the mom, yes, Mary's
Okay, so
Oh,
mother.
the dad had passed away at some point
Right.
when she was pretty young. She's an interior decorator.
Oh, I missed that. Okay.
Yeah, like in the beginning of the movie, they're like during the intro, which is like minute. Just like my mom became the #1 in Christian interior decorator in the
Yes.
region,
Okay.
which
You're
is like
right.
who's
I
keeping track
remember
of
that.
that?
Yeah.
Like, what is like, like
right.
is there a ceremony or like some
They're
kind
like
of
checking
award system
your
for
you're
that? Yeah,
checking
like
your
yeah.
And I'm kind of wondering what does that entail? Like being a Christian interior, like is it like just like crosses on the wall? Like how do we how do you determine who's the best?
Yeah. Only
it's
the
just like
most godly colors
yeah,
and
it's
Right.
like the Container Store,
Red, white, and
except
blue, baby.
the Container Store, except lots of lots of crosses.
Right.
It comes with like little I don't know any of like the Christian church stuff, but like I don't know, it comes with like an offering plate or something, in your
Well,
home.
Eucharist,
All
something.
of the
Eucharist, that's the word I was thinking of.
all of the in this home we laugh hard, pray harder, like stuff like
Yeah,
that.
Oh,
yeah.
yes, those
And
little.
also, I feel like for some reason, Ray Dunn stuff, like the cups that say drink, and like
Yeah.
that's very Christian mom to me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, she's designing those. But yeah, so just like you're right. I think you're completely right though. The only unrealistic thing in the movie is simply that no one notices that a student at the school is pregnant, including the mother, which apparently she's like too involved with the pastor having her little her little sinful thing. And that's the thing too about this movie is that everyone who's saying like you can't sin, you have to do Jesus, are all sinning like a motherfucker
Yeah,
constantly
Yeah.
against but it's not sinning if they do it because God said so.
that's par for the course though, because
Right.
when you're enveloped in like a faith and a community that is just very, very much open to interpretation as far as like what the scriptures say and what's supposed to guide you, you can kind of rationalize any decision you make based on, well, God told me to do it this way. God said this. Like when the mom is at dinner with the pastor and she's like, why would God give us these happy feelings if he didn't want us to, engage in adultery or like whatever.
Right.
Well,
I
because
know.
he like couldn't get a divorce. That the whole thing, like he was separated or something, or loosely.
It was like
The mother had
nebulous. Like
left, right? The son. So so the only character we didn't mention was Patrick, which is the
Mm.
pastor's son. Which of course there's the guy. He was off on missionary work for like skateboarding, which is also just like a random thing. And I think when they were trying to like get all like into where Hillary Faye was into him and asking about the missionary work, he's like, "No, I was just skateboarding." He's like, I don't care about this shit. It's just skateboarding." He
Right.
seemed pretty like one of like the cooler, like a good person who realized that this stuff is just insane.
Right.
Yeah, I
Of
think for
course.
him it was like just not going to that shitty Christian school with his dad as the principal. Just like I get to skateboard and just goof around. I don't really care about the rest of
Right.
it.
Yeah. Right. I think there's so many scenes. I feel like the movie, especially in sort of the center, like the middle part when there are just lots of incidents at school, they're just scene after scene. Sometimes it felt like they were just, I don't want to say they're going for like the shock value because I think it seems very realistic, but they have like the sex ed scene and they have like the prayer scene too, where they're, Cassandra's characters, which is the video you posted on that video that you said you took down, where she's like speaking in tongues or like obviously pretending to do it.
Yeah.
And then I think they made a comment like, oh, now she was like the most popular person at school because like God spoke to her. It's just like this whole, I feel like everyone wants to, because of what they've been told, like really wants to believe in something constantly. And when they see something that's worth believing in, they're just going to latch onto it. And they latch onto her character.
Right. Do you guys hear that background noise? Side question.
Oh
I
yeah,
could, like, very lightly.
Okay. All right. Cool. I was slightly distracted by that. So.
Well, I was just saying like how it's very much like Cassandra's little like speaking in tongues. It feels like they're very much like the kids all seem like they want to believe something because they don't know anything else. And so they're just latching on to something. I mean, I guess it could be if you're in like a secular school, like in public school, it's a different, I don't know.
Well, a lot of that, a lot of the whole like the worship thing, which they combine into like the school assembly, it's all formulated to elicit a sort of emotional response that like people are going to engage with and have a really serious emotional response with, and then it kind of like latches them onto the whole like faith and the church further. Like when you see them with like their hands up and everything, and like I mean, if you go to like some of these services, like people are crying and like rolling around, and like it's really intense emotionally. And after an experience like that, like people have two choices. You can either like believe that it was real, like you were touched by the spirit, or you could just be like, well, that was fucking stupid. Like, what was I doing? Like, I'm embarrassed now. And people aren't usually going to choose the second choice. So like when she starts standing up and like ripping her shirt open and everything, and like except for the couple of people who like catch on, they're all like, yeah, no, this is probably real. Because the whole speaking in tongues thing, I remember more when I was younger, not so much like when I was leaving the church, but when I was very young, I remember being in Sunday school while my parents were in like the regular service at one of these huge churches. And they like sat us in a circle, and we're like 5 and 6 years old. And they're like, okay, we're all going to speak in tongues now. You go, and you go, and you go. And I'm like, I'm even thinking at that point, like at my like teeny tiny age of like 5 or 6, like isn't that just supposed to be a thing that like happens? And also, isn't speaking in tongues just like speaking in other languages so anybody can understand you, so they know what you're saying? But instead of it's just like gibberish or whatever. So they're all kind of conditioned to like expect this and be excited about it, even though it's like complete nonsense.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. The fact that you guys were taught to speak in tongues is truly amazing.
It's wild. Yeah, it's super weird. And even my mother, who was like, she's like, oh, my partner's laughing in the other room, because I don't know if he hears this or he's laughing at something else, but he knows my mom. But anyway.
Yeah.
Even her, she was like, that was weird. Like,
Yeah.
that's not supposed to happen. They're not supposed to try and coach you into like an experience with the Holy Spirit. But like in that room, when she does that, like, yeah, they would all be like, oh yeah, shit, it's happening. This is what we've been waiting for. This is the moment.
Oh, right.
What's the like speaking in tongues as a child to like being on like a communist podcast pipeline look like? Seems like a pretty like low odds.
I feel
probably
like,
not as low as you think.
I don't know.
Not as low as you think.
Okay,
for sure.
I mean, well, actually, I have a curiosity, since you both have the Christian background. How do what's the? I don't want to be like, it's like, tell me like your life story, obviously, but like, how does one like break out of that to like almost going in? You could almost call it like conservative Christian to like leftist politics. Is really like, I'm holding my arms up for those listening, from like far apart in some sense, right? It's like a very wide. I don't know. Do you know? Does that make sense? What I'm trying to say?
Oh no, I think my foundation has really always been in intellectual honesty and honesty in general. And I mean, yeah, legitimately up until once again, like 23, 24, I thought I was doing the right thing. I mean, I was a, Christian socialist at the time, but still, I was like always sitting there saying like, yeah, no, this is what is right. This is what is true. And then that continued to, shift as I found more truth and I was honest with myself. And now now later on as a, atheist, I have those honest conversations with, my friends and family, just saying like, hey guys, like let's be real here. We have, like, for example, like one of the things I mentioned to them, like, we don't have proof of the supernatural whatsoever. I think we have to be honest with ourselves about that. Like you would never say that, werewolves are real because that supernatural isn't real, but you also say that it's real in this aspect. Can we be honest with ourselves or no, not really? So, it always started off with honesty. And the moment that you like actually seek honesty, intellectual honesty and truth, I guess, you're always going to be on that route out of, religion. So,
yeah. It's kind of antithetical to their that line of thinking. Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah.
Wow. I can see that.
For me, it's kind of I don't know. Like I personally don't have any real connection aside from like memory to the religion and faith that I was raised in. I do see the value in spirituality and faith as far as it relates to culture and how it can be a comfort to people, in whatever way that's necessary. For me, it ultimately came to a point where I was like, is it doing more harm than good? For me personally, I didn't see the value in my own life of aligning myself with a faith that ultimately was at odds with a lot of what I believe personally and a lot of who I am as a person, and I am a not straight person who has a child out of wedlock, and I'm living in sin, and I've never really fit neatly into any of the categories that I wouldn't have to apologize for if I was to still align with that faith and that religion. And I saw firsthand the way that it allowed people who I very much depended on and loved to fail me and themselves, and a lot of other people, gave them an easy out for accountability, which ironically is one of their huge things. Accountability is like they're, it's a big, it's a big deal. It's one of their big words. But in practice, it doesn't look that way. So I don't
Their
know.
version's different.
Yeah, once I became an adult and I realized like I don't believe any of this. It kind of felt like I was play acting through a lot of it and trying to please people other than myself and people who I couldn't even see and didn't know were there. So, I wasn't happy. I didn't feel a need for it for me. I think there's ways to, have a faith and have different kinds of spirituality and stuff that aren't detrimental to others, but that has to be the key. That has to play into it, because as soon as what you believe is harming other people in irreparable ways, then there's really no defense for it. So,
Right.
and the faith I
Yeah.
was raised in doesn't meet that metric at all.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I forgot what exactly you said that sparked this idea. Maybe we'll figure out what it was. But I feel like a lot of people stick with the church even though they don't really. I feel like a lot more people like actually don't believe than what we like.
Yeah.
I've we actually identify as this, I guess, or as non-believers. But like, there's still a lot of non-believers are in the church, in my opinion. That's because the community, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people, like, I mean, heck, when I was on my way out, when I realized that I was an atheist, because it was a realization, I was like, dang, I was really hurt, because I was like, wow, now like all these people, like this entire my community, that's gone. The people, that I really, hung out with and all that's all over, a lot of people I feel like stay around because of the um community, and I feel like that may have something that has a lot to do with capitalism, I guess, which
Yeah.
is another conversation in and of itself. But like, we've been stripped of like third places and places in which people can like, hang out and exist in community, and church is like the last place that people can actually like commune with one another, actually hang out and stuff like that. Yeah, don't know why I thought about that, but something you said triggered that thought.
No, but you're absolutely right, because this is something I feel like, I don't know if I've talked about it with you, Evan, but I know it's something that has come up in conversations with people. Christianity, part of the reason it has such a stronghold here, as far as like evangelical Christianity, is because it provides that sort of community. Like it there's events like a few times a week. A lot of them have pantries and stuff. They have childcare. There's all of these resources that otherwise are not available to people unless they give away a little part of themselves. If they don't actually believe, they resign themselves to signing up for this faith.
They need it.
And they need it because they don't get it anywhere else. And that's something that, I mean, as leftists, like, it,
Yeah.
it's incredibly important to keep in mind, because providing that for people, giving them an out from a community that expects them to basically like, sign away a part of themselves in order to get the things they need, as opposed to just like, hey, like, you are a human and you exist and you deserve these things, these supports, this community. We'll give it to you. Like, that's, I don't know.
Yeah.
They're kind of doing what most communities don't have. And
Yeah,
it
when
does
the
make it
system
so
doesn't
much harder
provide their
for
basic
people to
needs.
live. Yeah, it makes it incredibly hard for people to leave, because I experienced the same thing. Like, I was like 18, 19 years old when I this is like a decade ago now, but like when I left the church, I lost almost everybody. And it's not an easy thing to do,
Mm-mm.
I mean, it's not like leaving like the Mormon church or anything, but like I based on like my conversation with like ex-Mormons and stuff, similar, you're basically excommunicated. And that comes up in the movie a couple times, because as people, like with Mary, when she comes in the prayer circle and she's like, it doesn't mean anything. She's like, well, give me your pen. I can't have that. Like, very easily, people are excommunicated and they're stripped of their community. They don't have any support systems, and people need that. Like, it
Yeah.
makes it so hard to make that decision to leave. So,
Right. And I mean, geez. Yeah. And they're scared to leave, and they're scared to, like, go outside of the norm, outside of those, set standards. I mean, yeah, that's why Mary was hiding the pregnancy like
mhm,
this entire time. This is why she was trying to protect Dean
yeah,
from from everyone finding out that he was gay. Because she didn't want for him to be excommunicated. She didn't want him to be othered, because she knew what would happen if you are othered in these Christian spaces.
yeah,
She knew.
And she didn't even, and what's amazing is because they don't even like prepare any of these kids for the ideas outside of it, the ideas of like sexuality or everything is so repressed
mhm,
that, like, what did she think was like gonna happen? She was like gonna have the baby like in her like root. I don't know. I mean, she's scared. I understand. Like,
yeah,
she's not thinking these things through, but it's just like the repression, I think, of so much of everything, of everyone.
Right.
Like,
yeah,
they're stripped of their individual. Well, they're
Yeah.
stripped of their individuality in some sense, I guess you could say.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah,
Yeah.
Another,
I mean,
yeah,
yeah. I
another
mean, if
aspect of
you,
capitalism too. Just like everyone is
yeah,
individualistic and within themselves, but this does create like a community. Like I think you were just saying, is that it's missing from our
mhm,
society. Well,
mhm,
from our country, not all countries, perhaps, but America
yeah,
and such.
yeah. I feel like, yeah, capitalism is something that, beats out individuality. And like, religion is the stick. I would definitely say so. It's the stick that capitalism uses to, like, beat out that individuality,
yeah,
or however what you say that.
Yeah,
yeah,
well, and creates like the ultimate thing that they need, which is like culture war. You know,
mhm,
like that's the number one thing that's essentially almost like the at the center of it. It's like the Christian right versus, and every
The
issue that's
atheist.
born out of that with the abortion, and you can name, oh, yeah, they're the rainbow on my beer can is now like, or whatever the
Oh.
Starbucks cup, but you can pick whatever issue you want of the month. It's the same crap. It's just this creating that community in the church makes it easier to build those walls between people and like
yeah.
othering everyone.
Because it fills the
Right.
need for community and support to an extent, but it also reinforces all the ideals that are necessary for the culture war to continue.
Right.
Because there's that
Right.
built-in sort of like self-policing thing within the church, which plays into, the weird dynamics in like the Christian school with them, like that one scene when it's Christmas and Hilary Faye's opening all her presents. She's like, "Oh, these are so wonderful. Thank you so much. But I think we need to take a second and really pray for those who don't have the body of Christ in their life. So we should pray for Mary." And it's like it's a very it's like the most like in your face underhanded bullying
Yeah,
to sort of like zero in on someone and like pick them out of the crowd and make them feel othered, but also look like you're doing them a service while doing it. And that's the sort of dynamic that's present within these so-called communities built by like evangelical churches and stuff. Like your position within the community is very much in, it's contingent on your fitting the sort of norms that they require.
exactly.
Otherwise, you end up the subject of the if anyone's backslid and would like to come up to the front,
Oh my
if you'd like to rededicate your life to Christ today, please come down to the front. And and everybody's looking at like a couple of people. People are looking around and like, okay, and then everybody
I
always knows what
think
they're talking about.
right. I guess a personal thing that I'd like to point out about that scene is like it's always funny that the pastor is always out there like, oh, if anyone, the pastor said, I know you guys have backslidden this summer. I'm like, what about you?
Yeah.
Like like in every situation with every single pastor, youth pastor, whatever, there or for any person in a position of power, there is no like accountability. There is no nothing, none of that. I mean, I feel like, partially in scripture, they talk about like, oh yeah, don't question the man of God and stuff like that. And that goes, yeah, I saw that eye roll. I know that goes with like, people in power, kings, you know what I mean? They have that built in there. They have that, they mentioned, of course, pastors and such. Yeah, no, like I just think every single time I like look into the Bible as someone who is outside of Christianity now, I'm like always think to myself, I'm like, wow, like if I wanted to like build an empire, if I wanted to like build a complete like obedient set of people, this is exactly what I would do. These are the exact things that I would tell everyone.
Yeah.
Like an invisible God's gonna send you to hell if you don't think I'm awesome, and if you don't listen to the people that I tell you to listen to, and everyone's like, which God? And you're like, you're gonna go to hell if you question him.
Yeah.
Like
The God.
Yeah, it's like, well, it's
yeah,
like
the
this always reminds me of like George Carlin's stand up where he's like, do you believe in God? He's like, yes, you're good. Do you believe in my God? Nope, you're dead. Do you believe like it's that's like it's the longer bit, but and it also just reminds me too of just like the idea of kings too, like being able to subjugate their people over believing in the God that they've chosen for themselves. So
Mhm.
it just creates all kinds of subjugation.
Yeah. It's about establishing a hierarchy and then thereby control,
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. The so some of the other like random notes that I put down just from like really funny scenes, and I think the script in general too, it was like they have lots of like little very funny jokes. Like the whole piece when they noticed that Mary had gone to the Planned Parenthood, they're like, oh, she could be there like to plant a pipe bomb. And I thought like that was like one of the funniest like bits in the whole thing. And
Because in the first scene, they show her and Hilary Faye, like, and presumably the other girl. I didn't pay attention, but they were like protesting outside of Planned Parenthood, and then a girl's walking in, and then they turn around, they're like, yeah!
did you notice
Like,
one of the
stabbing people.
posters had a swastika on it? I took a picture as it went by on my phone. I swear to God. But it was like, it wasn't like it wasn't meant to be like that they were Nazis. It was, I have to look at the picture. It was like a weird thing, but yeah, it was
Classic switcheroo. Yeah, they're like, oh,
yes.
Nazis did this. Nazis killed babies. Is that what
yes, basically yes.
Yeah.
But in 2023,
yes.
Yeah.
people would watch that now and be like, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. They're like, what? They're just using their free speech. It's
right.
Just like I feel like every line is so like pointed and again like on the nose. I think at some point Hillary says like, I think it's when they're doing the prayer circle for Dean. She says like, oh, prayer works. It's medically proven. I'm like, okay. And that's where I feel like, I mean, people would probably say this.
They do say that.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's none of this feels like
It's not made up. I mean, there's one point where she's like, okay, once we win the costume contest on Halloween, when they come in with the jogging suits, like the track suits, the velour ones, the short sleeve ones. Once we win the costume contest, then we can hand out, instead of candy, we can hand out tracts to the kids. Like religious, like I would assume chick tracts, because that would just be like cherry on top. Yeah, that's 100% right. I was honestly like shocked that they were like celebrating Halloween, because some of the
for
churches
real.
I went to, they did like Harvest Fest instead.
Exactly.
Yeah.
too much Satan in the or I don't
Oh,
know.
Hallows Eve? No, that's
Yeah.
pagan. That's
The
not. That's
fact,
not okay.
Pagan, yes.
right, the fact that they had Halloween, you know, and a prom, that I was like, this is one liberal church, but at the same time, you know, very much so not. You know, in some ways, very not liberal, but in other ways, you know, very liberal.
But isn't that almost like more easier to like trap them, because it gives them like the feeling of like the regular community, but then also they're still trapped in this like Christian circle.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
In my head, that would be like a smart thing to do, but I
Like
don't
to
know.
have Halloween and
Well,
prom.
the prom at least.
Yeah.
Hmm,
Yeah, the
I don't
Christian
know.
school I went to, they didn't have prom. They had like a dinner for the seniors.
The Last Supper.
No dancing. Yeah, the Last
Yeah.
Supper, presumably of their high school lives, but it's also like a really tiny, like crappy Christian school that was in like Pennsylvania, and was on it was based in a retreat center. So all of our classes, like half of them were in different buildings, and like grades were combined because there were so few students. So like 6th and 7th grade were together. And each year they would do alternating ones. And you would think that it would matter what order they did them in, but apparently not.
Yeah.
Yeah. So prom was a din.
But yeah,
But
no,
no,
but yeah, no, the Last Supper, that's very fitting, very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the like the end of the movie, like once I feel like the culminating scene, like how many movies are like, you know, the prom is like the final like hurrah. I felt like everything sort of comes together in like like the most perfectly comical, but then also like the very end to like the very last scene, like when the baby's born, they're like there. It is very sweet.
yeah.
But I think it's funny that the people from this like retreat center, Dean, they like steal the van and like attend the you know, like basically like a gay couple has now come to the prom, like the people who've been kicked out of the school coming to the prom. I kind of just love that whole that last
It, it was good. It was good. It did alarm me a little bit because I'm watching it and it's just chaos. And I'm like, where is the security? Like for this prom? Like, first things first, there's a prom. Secondly, who like there aren't like tons of teachers and security like trying to like separate couples who get too close.
yeah, there were no chaperones with this.
That was weird too. And the fact they had that like Christian band there, and first of all, like you don't go to prom for a concert. So that's always weird for me in movies when they show that, like as if that's like what you want to do. But whatever.
Right.
But yeah, nobody's like saying like, okay, like 2 Bibles between you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like that
Give
would
room for the Holy Ghost or something.
yeah, leave room for the Holy Spirit, of course. Yeah.
Yeah,
I know.
that was very bizarre. But I mean, it needed to set up the, you know, the taking down of Hillary. You know, they had to take her down a little down a peg, and you know, I feel like her like going crazy at the end. They don't really like ever really show it or kind of give any ending to it, but she's sort of like realized that she's like been duped in some sense.
Yeah,
Or
she says sorry. There's at
Yeah.
least a little bit of a redemption for her there.
yes, she does say she's sorry.
She made up with Roland,
Yeah.
and he kind of, you know, yeah, when she was like, you know, does God still love me? I feel like, you know, he forgave her in a way because he was like, you know, he probably does.
Yeah.
And I kind of, helped her out a little bit, even though he fed into her delusion. He's an atheist, but it's whatever.
I liked when
Yeah.
he was a roller skate for Halloween. That was cute.
Yeah.
They could have actually gotten a disabled person to play his character, but that was pretty cute.
Right. Also, another note on Roland, I just love how, like, I don't know, like, I guess metaphorical, the entire, like, dynamic with him, Hilary Faye, and Cassandra has been, like, when he was chilling with Hilary Faye in the church, very much so treated as other disabled people in the church, kind of like a toy, kind of like, something that they kind of keep on the side to, elevate themselves. When he was out with Cassandra, he was out there, he was driving cars, he was rolling on his own. Actually, the very first time, and I took notice of this, but the very first time that he actually was like wheeling himself around was around Cassandra. Any other time, he was being pushed. I was like, this is amazing. Like the stuff that happens when you leave the church, you get to stand up on your own feet. Not literally, but you know what I mean.
Well, he was actually like treated as a person. Like he
Yeah.
actually he wasn't just like a body in a wheelchair, which also is crazy because they say that Hillary was like given, like they could have fixed him. Did they say like he was in an accident? They could have helped him.
No, he fell out of a tree and she found him, and that was
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Okay. Well,
And made it worse,
I was
maybe.
thinking that I was thinking that they spend the money. They spent like the money to like make Hillary like.
Oh, yeah, because they send her like fat camp, and then they get like surgery for her or something. They do like a whole bunch of stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
But no, what they say is like they wanted only one disabled kid, and she was the easy fix because he wasn't. I mean, they couldn't cure his disability. Like that wasn't
Right.
a
Yeah.
thing. They were like, well, she's
Yeah, his
Yeah.
character is sweet. Or the Macaulay Culkin's character
love
Roland is
him and
like a
Cassandra.
good character.
They're such a cute couple. I love them together. It's really
They really
sweet.
are.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did it right. So I was just looking at something on IMDb, like the notes. Number one, Michael Stipe co-produced this movie, which I
Oh,
did not know, which is very funny. And then the other thing that I saw was that apparently they had all these places to film like in a Christian church, and when all the locations and the like Christian band found out what the movie was about, they're like, nah, we're not going to do this. And they like all dropped out at the last minute, so they have to like find, I guess, like new locations. Which I think is like almost like prove you've just proven the movie, everyone.
I'm not gonna lie. I was watching like clips of like saved on like YouTube, just like messing around and looking through the comments. Oh my gosh, so many butthurt Christians. It's so funny. They're like, God will get you for this. This displeases God. This will not be a joke. This isn't funny. This is blasphemy. Yeah. Yeah.
Did they write those comments while they're like at church? They're like, how dare you?
Because it's evangelism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why, like, I mean, YouTube comments in general are just like an absolute dumpster fire. And it's usually like, that's not usually the kind of comments you see though. Usually I feel like it's more like, I don't know, like I picture like teens like saying just like horribly racist and misogynistic things all the time. But so it's kind of almost funny to me that like I picture like evangelical Christians going on YouTube and like commenting on those videos. Kind of gives me a little bit of a chuckle.
Oh yeah.
Like they're gonna fix everything with their comments.
Exactly. Oh man, all the commenters in there. Every one mattered than the next. Oh, glorious.
Yeah. The other thing I also saw was that Anne Hathaway was supposed to play Hilary Faye, but they couldn't afford her.
Not
oh,
surprising.
Because the budget was
Wow.
only like a couple million.
I was thinking
Anne
of her
Hathaway.
when I was rewatching because what's her face that plays Tia was in Princess Diaries with Anne Hathaway.
Oh,
Right.
I wonder if
yeah.
that's like a, I don't know, some kind of connection.
Right.
Yeah.
Was that this was before the Princess Diaries, right?
Oh, and I think it was also, she was also supposed to be in the movie Ella Enchanted the same year. So it was like a combination of the two. Like they couldn't afford to like
Oh.
take her away from that movie with more money.
Well,
I
I
guess
mean,
it's
so
Mm.
it's
like
great.
she could have done one of them, and if she had been, she would have actually been really good in this movie.
Yeah,
I mean, probably.
but definitely out of their budget for
No,
sure.
Princess Diaries was
What the movie
2001.
was. Okay, wow.
It was 3
Okay,
years before this, which is I
gotcha.
didn't realize it was that early.
Wow. Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, there's some other like funny notes here that I was looking at. Apparently, the film was set in Baltimore, Maryland, which I think I caught at some point as having being from Maryland. I feel like they had some sign or something at it, but yeah,
I
it
feel
was
like
all.
I
Oh,
feel
go
like
ahead.
it's very fitting to like, have that film like filmed in either, Baltimore, Maryland in general, or Pennsylvania, two cities LMAO, states really big on like, religion historically,
Yeah, that's definitely. Let's see. Well, yeah, you from being from Pennsylvania, Smirk. That's I know a lot of people from like the Philadelphia area, and I feel like it's a very religious, like a little religious core, especially like also like Pittsburgh too. I know a lot of people from Pittsburgh.
I mean, I'm from New Jersey originally, but I've lived in Pennsylvania a bunch. This movie felt like Pensacola, Florida.
Pensacola,
Interesting.
Florida. Okay.
Well, that's where they have the Pensacola Christian College, which
Okay.
It doesn't make sense that it would have taken place in Maryland though, because when they show like the scenes during Christmas, like no one's wearing a coat
well,
like
yeah,
outside,
I was wondering that.
right?
Yeah.
So is that where it's supposed to take place? Because they say Cherry Hill a couple times. I know there's Cherry Hill in Jersey.
Yeah, it says it's set in Baltimore.
Okay.
I guess it doesn't mean that it takes place there. It can't take place there. Like it wasn't cold.
Yeah.
That's
Exactly.
Yeah, there's never any weather. Like they
that's
don't.
the other.
Obviously,
So there's two
they filmed
unrealistic
in
things in
Southern
this movie.
California for sure, but like
It's unrealistic that she hid her pregnancy and that this place took place in Maryland.
Yeah.
Right. Oh gosh. Unless we're talking about in the future, with climate change.
Oh,
This
yeah.
is prophecy, if anything.
That's true. Although I oddly enough, this past like few days, it's been like winter weather. It's been like 40 degrees. It like snowed a foot in Pennsylvania yesterday in May. It's like, okay, that's
But this weekend,
Jeez.
well, I don't know about you, Evan, but up in this part of New York, we're supposed to get like 60s, 70s over the weekend.
yeah, it is supposed to warm up just like a couple days. So be finally nice. But yeah, I don't know if there's any last bits you wanted to share that we, notes you had about the movie or anything else.
I was pleased at the end when her mother wakes up and she's finally getting the questions right, and not Jeopardy, because every time I watch it, I think it's going to be Jeopardy, but it's never
Christian
Jeopardy.
Jeopardy.
Yeah, where they're doing like a quiz show kind of thing, and she's like, Jesus Christ, and then she's like the person who gives up their son, and then newborns bond during the first 3 minutes, and that's when she like comes to the realization. I think like that's what we're supposed to take from that, is that like she's understanding like, wait, no, like I can't just like make my kid go to this unwed mother's house and like give up her baby, like so happy to see that happen, because yeah, that's very real. Like newborn separation is incredibly traumatic, and it's not something that comes up in a lot of like these like movies with teen pregnancy as a plot point. I mean,
Yeah.
not Juno in particular,
Yeah.
but in the context of like the Christian thing, it's like that's always what they put forth as a viable option, as opposed to abortion. It's like, well, I don't know, like, is it like based on the outcomes? Like, I don't know, like that's not really a reasonable thing to put forth as when you take into consideration like the trauma to body and mind for like both individuals in that situation. So I don't know. I like the ending of the movie. It's heartwarming.
Yeah, they did.
I tear up a little bit every time, but I always do when there's like a baby. So
they did give it a nice ending. That is
right.
Yeah.
Everything turned out well. Plus, there's a baby.
Yeah, there's a little baby.
Like the pastor's like in the parking lot, like talking to himself if he should come in, and like
Yeah.
the little like, oh, he's like, all right, I can sin, but I can't hide my feelings anymore. It seems like there's this. Everyone is like able to like in some sense like express themselves in like a way they couldn't
Yeah.
at the beginning. In some sense, like they're finally not breaking from the church, but they're like realizing like maybe there is a little bit more
Right.
than
Yeah.
this. Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, I know Mary did say like, "Well, there has to be God because look at my baby," and I'm like, "Oh well, we can't save them all."
Well, they got Roland. Roland has been he's on his way out. So
Yeah,
with Cassandra.
yeah, man, oh man,
Oh yeah, and yeah, the other thing too is that so the I think I told you both already is that the director also like did weeds with
Mhm.
a bunch of like I guess not just only one actor from this movie, Mary Louise Parker. So I thought it was kind of a funny thing that surprises me that like he went from doing this movie to like doing a movie about like a mom who sells weed. I don't know.
Yeah.
She got
right?
out of the church and now she sells weed. So that's Mary Louise Parker's her
Yeah.
her her pipeline for this.
Yeah, huge character development right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good for her.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, James and Smirk, thank you both for coming on talking about this and opening a little to your experience. It was fun.
Yeah, it's been awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.
Of course, yes. And you've been listening to Left of the Projector, and you can listen to episodes on your podcast platform of choice. Like, subscribe, and rate the show if you can. And have a good one.